Show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe. Well, greetings, Cardinal Sin Nation. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to another episode of Into the Fringe. And tonight's guest is Stephen Bassett, who is a political activist, disclosure advocate, and the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has lectured around the world on the political implications of UAP/ET phenomena and given over 1,200 radio and television interviews. PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, including being featured on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and in the Washington Post and New York Times. In 2013, Paradigm Research Group organized and conducted a citizen hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. In November of 2014, PRG launched a 2-year political initiative out of Washington, D.C. that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. Bassett has appeared in many documentary films, and his lectures and interviews are well represented on YouTube. Welcome back to Into the Fringe, my friend, Stephen Bassett.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
It's wonderful to have you, and thanks for coming back on the show. I do appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. I know that you're a very busy guy, and we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. So while people are rolling in, I wanted to let folks know that we have some rare DVDs from the 3rd annual Laughlin UFO Mega Conference to give away, including the incredible Disclosures panel. It's going to be the last one, isn't it? Here we go. So we're giving that away to a lucky winner. Richard Dolan's presentation. And that's another giveaway for tonight. Paul Stonehill's lecture on Russian and Soviet UFO information. Mark D'Antonio's talk. He's an imaging analyst. And Danny Sheehan, and his talk is, I think, pretty close to the subject that we have for this evening. Wouldn't you agree, Steve?
Oh, yes.
And I just wanted to remind folks that you must be in the chat at the end of the show to be eligible to win. At 8:20 p.m. Central, the mods will drop the link into the chat for you to follow to put your name on the spinner wheel. And 5 or 10 minutes before the end of the show, we'll spin that wheel, and 5 lucky winners will be selected. Okay, let's get into the questions, and we will take questions from the chat in the second hour. So, Steve, what are your feelings about David Grush, the UFO crash retrieval whistleblower? How important his leaks have been, and do you find him credible?
I find him quite credible. The provenance for David Grush is pretty well established. He worked on the UAPT task force, UAP task force, way back in its earliest days, the one that was set up under the legislation that Rubio put in the 2021 NDAA, or the COVID bill, actually, is what it was called, an omnibus bill. So he was there to deal with the subject. All right. Nobody knew where things were going to go, but we were underway. And there was an entity, there was an office, and there was indication that people would be able to respond to that office. All that's well known and established. He was contacted by X number of people, but apparently some of them were involved in SAPs, special access programs, possibly even USAPs. And they gave them information. Now, some would have simply taken that information down and waited to see what developments took place with the program, with the government's intentions, and so forth. Grush chose not to do that. He felt that the information was worth conveying to the appropriate authorities, not the New York Times, but again, appropriate authorities. And that would be the Congress. Now, all of the details are not fully known, but he clearly approached some people, possibly at the DOD, with this information, conveying it to them. This is what I was told. You should know this. Might have been one of the committees. And it's possible that he has said this, and it is known. I'm keeping up as best I can, but I'm telling you, it's like trying to dodge work with an avalanche, right? It's impossible.
It changes every day, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's changing all the time. So the response was, I don't know what the response was to him conveying that information, but he started getting hassled by people within the government, whether they were in part of the or above or connected to the UAP task force, and I don't know. But he was getting bothered. He was getting harassed.
I heard he got death threats.
Well, eventually, I don't know initially, but so he got serious, and he took it to, I believe, the Inspector General's office of the DOD initially. Might have gone directly to the intelligence community IG. In fact, he may have, seeking relief, all right, and made a proper filing of concern. And so far, that's not a lot, nothing to get excited about, except we've learned subsequently that the lawyer that represented him in that complaint was none other than the former Inspector General of the intelligence community. I believe it was McCullough, who was then working in a private firm, the Rose Law Firm. So let's be clear. The former IG is not going to represent an unknown entity that has a problem that's walking in the IG's office of the intelligence community. He knows full well exactly who he is and his background and everything else. More importantly, they won that complaint. It was accepted, and he got some relief. And so he goes back, and then I think at some point he goes to the Intel committee. Or that might have been before. Whatever, there's this, he's trying to get information to the right entities. He's getting harassed. He goes to the IG's office. He gets some relief, and then he goes back to the UAP, waiting to see what's going to happen. Well, what happens is, of course, things dragging out. This process is not going as fast as anybody wants, but it's going faster than it ever has in history. So, as we know, there was additional legislation that added more structure. The name got changed. It was moved out of the ONI over the Navy. So he's hanging in there, but starts getting more harassment from who knows where. Because look, it's like one of those restraining orders that people get. Typically, they don't work, right? But in fact, all they do is make the other person even madder And then it all ends up as an episode on Nightline or Night, whatever the hell that show is.
Yeah.
Dateline. So now he gets up concerned. He's getting more threats, and he doesn't think the government's moving fast enough. He's not seeing a longer picture. And so as a result, he reaches out to journalism. He wants to go public, and he goes public as a whistleblower. And let me make it clear. Rush is a whistleblower. One, because he says he is. Two, because he does claim that the policies of the government with respect to this issue, in his view, are illegal. That makes him a whistleblower. They don't have to be illegal for him to be a whistleblower. He just has to believe that. And so he is coming out to blow the whistle on what he considers illegal activity. Almost all of the witnesses are not doing that. They are not whistleblowers, and I've said this countless times, and I'll continue to repeat it. They are simply witnesses with information to provide to the appropriate authorities, which soon will be congressional committees. Publicly. They've already been interviewed, so they're getting this information already. So he's a whistleblower, and he comes forward with a bang. He gets Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal to be his representatives on the journalistic approach. They make a number of approaches, which are not under a time frame. And in other words, they're not just saying, "Would you like the story?" They're saying this gentleman wants the story out right away, because he is now receiving threats that he feels are dangerous to him and his family. And some of the high-end entities like Washington Post, New York Times could not work that fast.
Well, if there were nothing to disclose, Steve, none of this would happen, right?
Of course.
I mean, it's a dead giveaway.
So Washington Post, New York Times know there's a major story here, but that doesn't mean they're going to just jump on anything without vetting it to a degree that is appropriate for them. So they passed. I think maybe a couple of cable news entities passed, but they went to the debrief, which is an excellent choice. Quality journalism and very independent.
Shout out to Micah Hanks.
Debrief publishes the article. They have already set up an interview with Ross Coulthard. And so it was an organized coming out with an interview with a new but very legitimate news organization, News Nation, and a legitimate but relatively new net-based publication, Debrief. And it landed like a bomb. And it landed Monday morning, June the 5th, the last day of the contact in the desert. And I was there, and I woke up in the morning, and my phone had all these messages on it. I slept in late. It's been a long weekend. And when I finally got going, I came downstairs, and I sort of realized what was happening. And people were pretty excited. This was a huge deal. Why? Because the moment you understood this is a legitimate individual with a legitimate provenance who did work at the UAP task force and did go to the IG, and he's talking technology, alien technology, ET technology, non-human intelligence technology, and non-human bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was not supposed to come out right now. That was not on the menu. That was a main menu item. We're still going through the appetizer salad sessions.
First course, as it were.
Courses, yeah. And so that was stunning. And so off we go. So he has now played an important role in the process. He has sped the thing up. He has presented a serious issue for Warner and the president. Warner particularly, because I believe he is the key person in terms of the hearings, that really make it much more difficult for them to delay if they had any intentions to delay. He's generated a huge amount of press in which bodies and technology are being mentioned. And a lot of people that are very young and don't know much about the history, probably not thinking much of this, but if you know the history, knowing that seeing significant news coverage of bodies and technology is a really big deal. So there you have it. Grush is going to be known for this. Now he's been interviewed by now, I think again, but now he's being interviewed by, I think, committees and Arrow in respect to being a witness. And when he steps into the congressional room and takes the oath, he's really going to be in witness mode there, not whistleblower mode,
Mm-hmm.
because at some point, really, that's what he is. He's a witness, and others will judge whether the policies were illegal or not illegal. And another thing I should mention is that, as far as I can tell, there have been no consequences to David Grush, other than possibly some more harassment coming in from. Well, he's been trolled by some people on the net. I don't think his life has gotten worse. I think it's gotten better. I think he's getting a huge amount of praise, and anybody taking any action against him now would be pretty stupid.
I haven't
So
heard any denials from the government
no,
or the DOD or any
they can't.
any of these entities.
They can't. And that was true when the nuclear weapons tampering witnesses came forward. They weren't getting denied. They were just being ignored. I mean, the government just pretended they didn't exist. But they came out years and years before Google arrived and
Right.
social media and Twitter and everything else. And so had there been Twitter and other stuff back when Bob Salas first came out, we'd have probably had disclosure 25 years ago. Point is that now this issue is worldwide. I'm tracking the coverage. It's enormous. All English language press, Australia, the UK, all the publications, India, right? And of course, the United States. These are the major centers of English language media.
So you'd say that his interviews have moved the UFO disclosure needle?
Oh God, yes. They've made it far more difficult to justify any further delays on these hearings. And so that, plus the actions of several members of Congress, particularly Tim Burchett and Comer, Comer is calling for a hearing in front of the House Appropriations Committee and says they've been trying to get witnesses together since early June. Burchett is giving interviews every opportunity and getting more aggressive with each passing week. Lately, he is raising this concept that the ETs are highly advanced, and we need to be really worried about what they could do to us.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking in somewhat apocalyptic terms, which is generating even more press. So he's being quite aggressive. I'm not going to debate that. I have different views about the ET presence, but the point is that that's getting more media and more attention. Now, if the government wants to moderate that, then they're going to have to hold hearings and get real testimony in front of the American people. And then Comer it wants to have hearings and has said in at least one article, he wants to have them before the end of July. And why? Because the congressional session is underway, and it's going to run from runs from last Monday, the 18th. I'm sorry. It started on the, let me see, the 10th, and it runs through the 28th. And then they go home for the entire month of August. So naturally, if he's going to have a hearing, he needs to have it before the end of July,
right?
Which is what they need to do. And if they don't have a significant hearing, then this thing is going to get out of hand real fast, because they're going to be out of town, and the media is going to continue to pound this issue, and God knows what else is going to turn up, and they're going to have to face the issue of whether to hold hearings or holding hearings as the next campaign season begins, which is going to be probably the most expensive in history, some of the most chaotic, and you're going to have thousands of candidates out there who have this issue hanging above their head without any real clarity, without anything to fall back on. And a lot of them are going to say, I don't know what to say. I don't know about ETs. They're going to look stupid. Everybody's going to look stupid. It's just a colossal mistake. And so they either hold these hearings before the end of July. They got to get. They have the witnesses ready. They have them interviewed. They could bring them into D.C. tomorrow, and I assume they'll be wise enough to pay their airfare and put them up. They could hold them right away. They could also call a special session in August, and the committee members of that one committee would come back to hold these hearings. Now, the advantage of that is that, one, the town will be much calmer. There'll be less going on. And the press will have nothing else to do but to cover that hearing. So it would just maximize the attention of the media and is doable. And I'm thinking, if there's an issue out there that a member of Congress, particularly a member of the Senate Intel Committee, would give up 2 weeks of their August vacation for, it's got to be this issue, right? And let me point out something. I've been challenged on some of the numbers I've been putting out. I project several 100 million viewers. And people say, not a chance. I mean, the January 6th committee had 20 million. The very first committee hearing held way back, Kefauver hearing, had 30 million. And that was a long time ago. And these are big numbers. But those were not global hearings, by and large. Not a global issue. This is a global issue with worldwide attention. So we need a different measuring stick. Here's the measuring stick. Soccer is a global issue.
Mm-hmm.
The World Cup was held in December of last year. Naturally, there were international feeds, which we can do in this country. It's up to the news media how many international feeds they want to light up, but they can light up as many as they want to. How many people watched the World Cup final in December the 18th of last year? 1.2 billion. How many people in general watched the entire World Cup? 5 billion people. And so if the media were to open up the international feeds and feed those hearings to the international media, the potential audience is, yes, hundreds of millions of people. And when you have hearings like that, every single member of the committee sitting in that hearing becomes a global star. Their Q quotient goes up 100 times. Their Twitter followers multiply. They become historical figures, and they know it. And so the table is set. Everybody wins. And so the message that I am putting out is you must do this now. No, so yeah, and I've got more to say about that, but let me give you a chance for more questions.
So these congressional hearings, do you think that they'll be different from the ones in the past, or is it just another situation where they're going to kick the can down the road?
Oh, God, no. We had 2 one-day hearings with roughly 4 witnesses and some submitted reports back in the 66, 68, which were not going to accomplish anything. But they were a show. It was kind of a show the flag thing. We're not completely oblivious to the fact that you're seeing these things for 20 some years. In fact, I think they were nefarious in a way. We've had a few briefings, not hearings, of members of the task force, members of the entities being set up, like Kirkpatrick coming in to kind of just brief the appropriate senator about what's happening, give him a little report. Here's what's going on. That's not a hearing. I'm pretty sure they didn't even take an oath. They just sat down and gave a briefing. These hearings will have witnesses, military witnesses. There could be easily, in a 2-week span, they could easily have testimony from 20 witnesses in 5 sessions for a session. These witnesses will literally set the world's hair on fire. And in front of an audience of what I believe could easily be in the hundreds of millions, they will give testimony that has been about evidence and events that is known to the research activist community for decades, but never presented under oath in front of that many people, in front of members of Congress.
Right.
The closest thing to that ever was the citizen hearing on disclosure, which I produced in 2013, where technically that happened. And you had nuclear weapons tampering witnesses taking a, quote, civilian oath and talking about our weapons being shut down. That didn't have a huge impact. It was well received. It was a statement. It was part of a project leading up to the election, which went pretty well.
It had kind of a snowball effect, though, right?
Well, it made a statement. but it's not the real deal. It was a mock hearing.
Sure.
But the most important thing it did was, I think, and I sent a copy of all 30 hours, a DVD set copy of all 30 hours, and delivered it to every single member of the House and Senate, 535 sets. Still, some people saw it. They didn't watch it all, but they saw what a hearing would look like. It looked pretty good. Went just fine. Thank you very much.
And it keeps it in the public view.
Yeah, it's had some effect, right? But the real ball didn't get rolling down the hill until 2017, which was almost 4.5 years after the citizen hearing on disclosure. But these hearings are a different matter. So where I am now, just to update your viewers, your listeners, is that for the last 18 months, I've been primarily in Los Angeles working on a significant media project related to this issue, which will launch hopefully soon. It's not huge. Initially, it was huge, but circumstances, pandemic, other issues in Hollywood and in the film industry had to pare it back. But behind it is much bigger stuff. That is going to launch hopefully soon. I've been working on that. And I have I'm set up with a place in LA, about 7 blocks from a major studio where this has been discussed and worked on.
And you're back in DC in the National Press Club building by now, right?
Well, I couldn't do both. So I had to, at least initially, I had to give up the office, which was very tough because that office was fantastic, in the National Press Building. Yeah. However, I have since reobtained a new lease, and I'm going back in the press building as of this weekend.
Great.
And I don't plan to ever leave it. So now I have the office again, and my intention is working from there. I'm going to engage as many offices as possible in a much more intense and aggressive way than I have in the past, because obviously of what's going on. So I'm initially targeting all the offices where the member, senator or congresswoman person, has spoken publicly to the issue. There's about 10 of those. And I'm looking to meet with either the chief of staff, their legislative aide to the appropriate committee, or the member themselves. So I'm going to do what I can there. I'm also reconnecting with a lot of media. And obviously, again, it's a different time. And it's been a different time for a while, but I was in LA. I couldn't do it. Now I can. And just to make the point, the Washingtonian Magazine, which is a very important Washington publication, it's the premier lifestyle magazine in this town. Every high-end mover, shaker, whatever in this town has got it sitting somewhere in their house on the back of the toilet, whatever to read. It's influential. And I had my 4th article in there just yesterday, talking about everything I'm telling you now, in my usual term, which is straight to the point. I don't run around the bush at all. And so that's just a good lead. That's a good beginning. But it's time for me to play a role in this process. I have a lot of other colleagues that have been doing great work, and they penetrated into Congress. They're doing interviews, documentaries, fine. But I have an approach that needs to be brought into play. And I'm looking to get on CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Not because my beautiful face needs to get some exposure there, but because the simple truth is I am the activist on this issue. Not that there aren't others.
You're the man.
The longest serving activist. And I simply do not talk about this issue quite like anybody else. Mm-hmm. I have an approach to it and a perspective on it that you simply do not hear. Well, and it's time for the American people to hear that perspective on their major news outlets.
That brings me to a question. I kind of wanted to back up to sort of the beginning and asked you what inspired you to dedicate your career to advocating for UFO disclosure. Was there a specific event or realization that motivated you?
I've always been a political activist at heart. That was generated in me. I led a pretty sheltered childhood as a military brat. You want for nothing. I had all my model ships that I would sail out in the pond. Almost went to the Air Force Academy, all that standard stuff. Then I went off to college in, as it happens, late 1964. And well, the timing of that was interesting because now I'm this young college student and, you know, I'm on my own. It's time to learn to think for myself. And guess what I'm seeing? I'm seeing lots of press and alternative press about the Vietnam War, which is literally exploding as I come into college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching it develop, and I'm not a fan. I was not on board. And so what I saw during my 6 years in college was America do things I couldn't imagine that they would do, act in a way I couldn't imagine it would act. I knew about World War II. I was pretty much aware of World War II. I understood the history of that. I know the things that happened. There's a lot of bad things that happened.
Yeah, on
But
all
what was
sides.
going on in Vietnam was not World War II.
Yeah,
What was going on in Vietnam were war crimes and unbelievably awful political decisions. And so my whole view of my country was shattered. And so that's how you birth political activists. So I wrote some columns in the new school newspaper. Eventually, I marched here and there, but I was a pretty immature kid when I went to college, and I didn't mature all that fast. I didn't have a clear picture of who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, and as a result, I didn't I didn't have it together enough to do what some did, which was sign up with a activist organization, an anti-war organization, and do activism, do all the stuff you do, really get into it. I didn't do that. I just kind of skirted it. But I was becoming an activist, and my activism was my thinking. And that continued on all the way through the 60s. I say, yeah, through the 60s, including some civil rights marches and so forth. But again, I did not join up. So I carried that with me through my life, and my life went here and there, kind of like most lives, not really landing anywhere important. Finding myself, I guess you could say. So at 49, when I decided it was time to get busy living or get busy dying, as Andy Dufresne said in the still my number one or number two rated movie on IMDb, Shawshank Redemption. Not surprisingly, I chose activism as my path. The question is, what would the issue be? And I decided the issue was the UAP issue. And the key thing that made that possible was reading John Mack's book in 1995. That was a game changer for me. Who he was, his background, his prestige, that he was willing to take the
would be
risk.
the abduction book, right?
Abduction, Humans Encounter with Aliens. Talking about the studies that he was doing, literally studies he was doing at the Cambridge Hospital as the head of psychiatry there, which is a Harvard operation. And he had, of course, a full Harvard career. He was taking a great risk, as I later found out. And so that impressed me. And then one of these kinds of little pieces of luck. I'd had plenty of bad luck in my life, though I don't want to compare myself to too many people, because I know there are a lot of people that have far worse luck than that. But I had some bad luck that prevented me from being all I could be. So I got lucky. And in the back of the book, Abduction was the name, the organization that he had set up in Cambridge, and the phone number. So I called them. And in some way, I persuaded them to let me volunteer. So I drove out, got an apartment, and volunteered for John Mack's organization in Cambridge for 4 months. Did what I could. These kinds of things are always tricky. Sometimes you'll fit in. Sometimes it'll be a nice fit in, it'll work, and you end up going on salary. And sometimes it doesn't. And I realized that I was not going to be able to stay and go on salary. But it was there in Cambridge when I made the key decision that, okay, and I was very highly energized by the time there and talking to and dealing with contactees, which even as a child, I was almost certain was really happening.
Right.
I didn't have much contact with it or engagement, but so now I'm talking to contactees in 96. And I made the decision, I made a simple calculation that the problem with this issue was not science, it was politics. It wasn't about proof, it was about politics.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about beyond a reasonable doubt, it was about getting the government to stop what I eventually called embargoing the issue. Like they embargo Cuba, only in this case, they don't even acknowledge there's an island there. You can't go there, but there's nothing there you can't go to. I mean, it was totally illogical. It was ridiculous, but it was political. And I said, there has to be a political solution. And so that's what I'll do. I'm going to help find the political solution. Then they came up with the idea, fine, let's register as a lobbyist. Nobody's done that. That'll get the attention of the Washington Post. It did. They wrote a huge article about me and launched my nascent activist career. And so that's how I became an activist on this issue. It was the right issue. It was the right decisions. I've never regretted it. Never will. But did I think in 1996, when I registered Paradigm Research Group as a lobbyist with the Senate, that 27 years later, the Truth Embargo would still be standing and in place? No, I didn't think it was possible. But then I didn't fully understand how it was created and how it was being maintained. But as time went by, the inevitability of its collapse was clear with each passing year. And now it is going to collapse. Its days are over. It's done, cooked, finished. Yeah. It's as I like to say, a dead policy walking. And so it's just a question of who is going to play the key role in ending this policy, which is a mistake. It was a mistake initially, but justifiable. In 1969, it was still a mistake, but a little less justifiable. In 93, it was still a mistake and far less justifiable. And now it's utterly unjustifiable, definitely a mistake, must end and will end. And that's what it took, 27 years. And I know enough about the history of other major activist movements to know that for me to bitch about, wow, I've been doing this for 27 years and it hasn't got the prize, it hasn't won the goal, is, well, being naive to the extreme, because a lot of activist movements would have taken 27 years in a second. It's not easy to get the government to give up its power, its secrets, or its held policies, particularly when the government really does think they're doing the right thing. And not always that's the case. Sometimes the government know flat out from the beginning it's the wrong thing. Those are a little easier to solve and penetrate. But when the government really feels it's doing the right thing, my God, it takes a lot to finally prevail.
And to that end, what role do you believe governments, particularly the United States government, play in UFO disclosure? And have there been any noteworthy developments in government transparency regarding this topic lately?
Oh, yeah. Over the years, there's been a number of revolutions or information that's come out. A lot of it was leaked by people inside. Just send out the microfiche and clean off the fingerprints. Document here, document there. A number of government witnesses have come forward without the same potential recognition they're getting now. And then, again, in preparation for this day, various entities have done some things which they knew would pay dividends later on when the criticisms came, when the desires for retributions came. So I think most people know this, that CIA actually released a trove of documents related to the UAP issue and put them up on their website. Go find them. And the FBI did it. The FBI has got a very substantial collection of documents. And when you go through them on their website, they're pretty compelling. They certainly don't undermine the ET hypothesis. They don't wrap it up, but they're very important, and they're actually being used by the citizen researchers. So you got the CIA and the FBI providing free access to documents that actually help the case. Why would they do that? They would do that because, well, you want to be able to get back in the good graces of the American people with a minimum amount of pushback. So they did that. So there's been this kind of transparency happening, but always within a certain limit, always under the threshold. Now, of course, it's changing. So when two men who I believe have been interviewed by one of the Intel committees, I think the Senate Intel Committee, or somebody, these are the actual USAP people that were talking to Grush. So Grush, as we know, was presenting secondhand testimony, and of course that's out of the question. Secondhand testimony must be thrown away immediately.
Sure.
If you're one of the debunkers and skeptics, it's irrelevant.
I've already seen there have been videos on YouTube of Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, "Where's the evidence?"
Yeah, well, Neil deGrasse probably needs to start planning a retirement for himself, because he's not going to fare well in what's about to happen. He's going to have a real hard time, though. I'm sure he'll come up with a plethora of excuses, rationales, and whatever to explain how he missed it his entire academic life. But whatever. The information that is coming out at this point from, and will come out from USAP's people, very likely, and others, is beyond. It's a whole level of transparency. Now, ultimate transparency, well, not ultimate, but broad-based, widely accepted and appreciated transparency that we want will not happen until after a disclosure announcement is made. Until the president says, matter-of-factly, there's a non-human intelligence here, in front of a lot of cameras, plenty of doors are going to remain locked. But the moment those words come out of his mouth, then those doors become unlocked.
Well, Steve, to that end, are there any specific policies or actions that you would recommend governments take to accelerate the process of disclosure?
Well, the process of disclosure is now in its final days, so there's not a lot of options here. It's really now very straightforward. They simply need to call the hearings. This has come down. A whole lot of work has been done for 4 years now. All the witnesses that were taken up on the Hill to talk privately with members of Congress, to get them up to speed, personally, face to face. The reports that were called for by the legislation, which were in the public arena modest, but there were classified reports that were provided. There are a lot of classified information that's been put in the hands of people on those committees that have the clearance to see that information. And so that's all been done. And then you have witnesses that have been interviewed. They've been pre-interviewed, which is necessary before you do a hearing. So there's nothing to stop them from starting the hearings tomorrow. And that's all they have to do. All they have to do is just make sure the media are lined up. I don't know what media is going to turn down access to a feed from these hearings. I would love to know their rationale. Mm-hmm. So all they have to do is notify the appropriate media to prepare to set up a feed request that they provide international feeds. Of course, they will broadcast it live on the government website, which is fine, which technically has an international reach. I mean, if you put something live, unless the country is blocking it, if you put something live up on a government website of a hearing, technically anybody can get to that website. But there are many countries where that's not, you can't do that. Right. However, if the media in that country provide a feed, they can feed it into their country and show it there. Whatever. The point is that one way or another, soccer, which is a relatively non-political pastime, had a game seen by 1.2 billion people. So the infrastructure is capable of doing it. We know that. So all they have to do is set that up, put the feed out, and just sit the witnesses down and ask them the questions under oath. That's all they have to do. The rest will take care of itself. I assure you. The response from the media and the public to the answers to these questions, just the public questions, not the questions that will be asked and answered in private session, which I'm sure will be pretty interesting too, but they won't be necessary. They're necessary because the committees need to know that, but they won't be necessary in terms of what we have to have here. That's all it's going to take. 2 weeks of the kind of testimony that I expect. And the White House will be looking out at a massive international media, foreign and domestic international media, ready to ask several 100,000 questions. And the idea that they're simply going to say, well, it was interesting, but we're not sure if we really need to go forward. I don't think that's going to happen. It's over. It's done. The president will be able, without having to have pressured anybody, without having to go beat up on any of his appointees at the DOD or the CIA, can simply have it be delivered to him on a silver platter in a nonpartisan way, because these hearings will be very nonpartisan. The president then happens to be the president who will get the last seat when the music stops. Could have been several presidents over these decades, but it's going to turn out to be Joe Biden. Does he deserve it? I don't really care. History will decide that. Mm-hmm. But he deserves it on the basis that he stuck around, and two, he's going to do it. And so that's it. 2 weeks of hearings, and the president will be able to comfortably confirm the ET presence, and nobody's going to argue with him, except a few lunkheads that are going to take their skepticism to the grave. And so, bingo, disclosures happened. And now we're in the post-disclosure world where the rules change. All kinds of things change. And access to information expands. The range of information that can be revealed expands. The likelihood of further lying disappears. And everybody out there who is not suffering from some sort of block of some kind is going to go out of their way to get in front of this issue, whether you're a politician, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a member of the military. You're going to want to get in front of this issue as fast as you can. And I admit, in the civilian population, there are people capable now, far too many, of completely denying reality parked right in front of their nose, put aside all common sense, and try to act as what is right in front of them isn't there, or deny the obvious. This is not a trait that we want to continue to conduct. This is not something we want to continue to do. We need the public to start thinking a little more clearly, using their common sense. But in terms of the institutions, the media, the DOD, the Secretary of State, the State Department, the Academy of Sciences, the National Science Foundation, and of course NASA, who is gearing up quite nicely for this, there will be no pushback.
Yeah.
They will, in fact, be pushing forward, trying to make sure that the public knows they are on board. That is all going to happen in a flash. And then to absolutely guarantee this thing remains the major issue for the next couple of years, is every head of state who has a reasonable basis to show that they know what's going on. And there's some heads of states that simply do not have access. Their countries are very poor. They're dealing with extremely difficult problems. That head of state doesn't need to come forward and throw their hat in the ring. But there's quite a few countries where the head of state is damn well going to come forward and confirm this as well to their people. And thus you're going to have 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 head of states in no matter of time, all on record, saying that this phenomena is non-human. And so now you're pretty much down to the flat earthers who are going to say, I don't care what you say. There's no ETs here and the earth is flat, and nobody's going to change my mind. And God bless them. I wish them a happy life. I wish the well for them. But I assure you they will have zero consequence on what's going to happen in the post-disclosure world.
So, Steve, I wanted to ask you a little bit about sequestered technology. What kind of technology has been gained from crash retrievals of vehicles of non-human origin?
There's a very powerful case for anti-gravitics, something that can fly in our sky without aerodynamics. There's a very strong case that we've engineered that, our own version of it. Whether we're flying around in some repaired ET craft, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. If they capture some completely intact, it would be possibly doable. But I think they've solved anti-gravity, and I don't think I have to point out that it doesn't take a lot of thinking to know just how significant public, civilian, and commercial access to anti-gravitics would be helpful to our world. I mean, there's a long list of very significant things. And it's just not a matter of getting someplace faster than another. There's all kinds of very powerful and important things that can come from that. There's strong evidence for that. The energy situation is more theoretical. Just because you see an anti-gravitic craft flying over, it may not be using alien energy technology. It may be using our technology, human technology, which, if you design the craft right, could work, but maybe not. Don't know. So energy is harder to know, but theoretically, plenty of scientists have sort of looked at it and said it's not likely that the energy needed to do anti-gravitics can be generated from our standard energy methodologies, from oil, gas, to cold fusion, to nuclear fusion. We've tried to make nuclear fusion propulsion, and it's not worked very well. So theoretically, there's a very good possibility that there is an energy breakthrough associated with these craft. If they have it, every day they sequester that is literally costing billions of dollars to the world economy, or at least to our bills, right? Adding money that has to be paid, which money could be going into the economy or to other sources. And also not having that technology out is threatening our existence in other ways. One of the things that will most profoundly affect our current trends, which are leading to seemingly apocalyptic outcomes, is reducing the cost of energy, which we spend untold trillions on, whether you're rich or poor, right? If you're a poor person living in a flat somewhere in the Bronx, that you pay the same amount for technology by and large than a person living in one of those penthouses in Central Park that costs $4 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not regressive. Progressive or regressive? It's not progressive. It's regressive technology. And so all that money is freed up. And so that has enormous implications, but also it seems more likely than not that energy technology, aside reducing the cost of moving electrons by 80, 90, 95, 98%, is non-polluting. And so we could make the conversion to non-polluting energy systems in a relatively short amount of time, which will have enormous impact on the other problems we're facing, including global warming, without question. It could be the answer to global warming. And as you know, we're spending huge sums of money trying to deal with global warming when there may be a technology that can do it for a fraction of the cost. These are going to be very awkward questions to answer in a post-disclosure world, which is one of the reasons they're trying to do this in a very public relations way that makes them look as good as possible, because when those questions start coming, they're going to be brutal to answer, and their comfort level is going to be at the mercy of the good grace of the American people. Now, fortunately for them, I think the millennials are going to be generous because they just don't know the history and they're just not of that mindset. But there's a lot of people, particularly the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, or what do they call them? What was the next generation? Gen Z, I forget.
Gen Z.
They're not going to be so generous. They're going to know from personal experience and their life experience that sequestering technology, while it had national security reasons, we paid an enormous cost for it. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars was just the cost of not getting it out, not the cost of researching it and classifying it and running a truth embargo. So a lot of money was wasted. And so all of that will be sorted out by history, and hopefully we will try to be as generous as we can as we take advantage of a new world and a new paradigm.
What are the implications that we can learn from contactee reports for disclosure, living in the post-disclosure world, and open formal contact?
Oh, that's where the real information is regarding ETs. They're the ones that saw them. They're the ones that have drawn them, painted them, communicated with them in the public sector. Because I know this is also happening in the military sector. They have their own contactees, and they treat them a lot better than the civilian contactees. I'm telling you, if you're a contactee in the government and you've got a security clearance, so basically you're safe from their point of view. I'm sure you're getting nothing but the finest foods, excellent, staff cars, whatever the hell. If you're in the civilian sector, you're nothing but a pain in the butt. So, but that's where the information comes from. We have a lot of information about what the ETs are doing. It's all coming from contactees. And the only reason we don't have national policies addressing what we know is there are no ETs. The contactees aren't having any contact with anybody. They're just suffering from various degrees of mental illness, which is another public relation problem they're going to have to answer. So the contactees are going to be a major source for understanding ETs, what they're doing, and make it a little easier to perhaps conceptualize their agenda, which we don't fully understand yet. If the government understands it, fine. That's just one more thing they're withholding from us. I'm more concerned the government's misunderstanding their agenda, which could lead to some rather unpleasant complications. But we won't know until they admit they even have an agenda. But the contactees are going to be extremely important in the post-disclosure world. They will be extensively engaged. They will write more books. There will be documentaries. They will eventually testify in front of Congress. They will have a great deal of impact post-disclosure. They will become teachers and mentors. And I speculate that the age of involuntary contact, uninvited contact, may end with disclosure. The ETs may elect to cancel that policy. There's some reasons why that might be a good idea. And if they don't cancel it with disclosure, I think when open contact occurs, formal kind of open contact occurs, which I think will follow fairly quickly, they might then end their abduction protocols. Now they have other things they're doing genetically, which they may continue. And it wouldn't shock me if some deal was struck post open contact where people had the option to volunteer so that they can continue their work, but with volunteers, people willing to be part of it in return for something. Because the work they're doing there is not a hobby, right? They're not engaging these contactees because they have nothing better to do. It is a big deal. It is a massive program. And so I have to assume it has great importance to them. One of the big questions that we'll have to ask post-disclosure is that is there importance in that work for us? There doesn't have to be, right? Hopefully it's a win-win that they need to do that work, but it's also going to benefit us. We'll see. These are some pretty big questions that have been waiting for answers for 70 years. So that's just a glimpse of the interesting information and all of the debates and dialogues that are going to take place post-disclosure, which are going to be far more interesting than any other dialogues we're going to see. There will be some TED Talks, I assume. I might even get a TED Talk. I apply, but they don't seem to have much interest. But who knows? Maybe I'll finally get my TED Talk.
Well, they only give you like 8 to 12 minutes on those, so.
That's okay. That's okay. Believe me, there's plenty of fine 8 to 10 minutes or 12 minutes one can do on this subject and leave quite an impression. So,
oh, sure.
But they'll just need a lot of TED Talks because there's going to be a lot of things to say and a lot of people prepared to say it. So, and TED Talks, by the way, they had their run, they had their day, they were hot, they were big. Now they're cooled off. They've become just background. This could
just
bring them back.
Something to put on the CV, you know?
Yeah.
So the big question, Steve, what would happen if formal contact took place without a prior disclosure event?
Well, for formal contact without this disclosure is going to be much more disruptive. You're going to have the governor saying, well, the president will have to come out and say there's ETs here. And when people say, well, why are you telling us that now? And say, well, because they're in the West Wing right now. And they basically told me if I don't disclose, they're going to walk out here and disclose for me. So I figure I better do it. I mean, any version of that disempowers the president, embarrasses the country, is disruptive, it's scary, and it hasn't happened, which is, by the way, a very exopolitical point. The ETs could scare us that way anytime they wanted to. There's a lot of ways they could announce their presence in ways that would be well beyond just private abductions or well beyond turning off our nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of ways they can make their presence known, which would be less than ideal, and they choose not to. So I think there's a message there that's worth considering. Why don't they do it? I think the reasons are positive. Others would say it's because they don't give a damn. Who knows? Again, all of these questions are answerable if we get disclosure from our president.
Yeah.
And definitely answerable if we get open contact with him, wherein I think some very significant matters are going to be literally brought up on day one, which way this has been all going since 47. I'm not suggesting the 47 crash was deliberate to trigger this. No. But 47 is the beginning of the era, and we have been heading for a relatively, I think, defined outcome for all 76 years, which I do talk about.
What are the indications that formal contact is a distinct possibility in the near future?
Well, it's always a possibility, but if they're intentions with this process are relatively positive, you give the human race a dignified amount of time to Google Google all the research, right? Google everything that's been done by those citizens, activists, and research that carried the water while the government was saying, ETs, we don't know what you're talking about. There's a lot of legitimate work there, and all needs to be reviewed. So they can do that. Plus, the government's going to be putting out information that'll be absorbed. The journalists will be doing their research. A huge learning curve could take place pretty quickly, where hundreds of millions, if not billions of people could become kind of up to speed, knowledgeable about the history and where things are and able to follow along. That's a big deal. And so if that were to take place, and again, we have global communications and network to network translation and in real time translation. Believe me, the Tower of Babel has been fixed. All right, and so the idea that the learning curve would be slow, no, it would be fast. 2 years, my God, we'll all, a good deal of the population will have master's degrees in exopolitics and exobiology and
It'd be a whole new window of opportunities.
In which case,
to learn.
Obviously, open contact would be somewhat mild. Wouldn't you agree? It'd be kind of anticlimactic, would it not?
And well, so especially if there were a disclosure event preceding it, yeah.
Preceding it, right, yeah. So I'm thinking, how much time do we need to become bored with the idea that, there's ETs? Not long. Humans get bored really fast.
I was really surprised, to be honest with you, Steve, that in December of 2017, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal's article and the release of the 2004 Nimitz videos and things like that, nobody seemed to bat an eyelash.
Well, look, I spend a lot of time on social media. I'm a populist activist. I'm tracking what the people are saying and doing. I'm reading the articles. I assure you, plenty of people batted their eyelashes. A lot of people batted their eyelashes. And a lot of that eyelash batting was not in public, right? There's no law that says, man, this is unbelievable. You got to run outside and start jumping up and down on your lawn. People were profoundly affected. And in many cases, they kept it to themselves. They projected that to their closer friends or their family, and they stayed home. But they watched the TV. I mean, they've been paying attention and reading the articles. So, but you don't want people running out in the street, yelling and screaming at the sky. You don't want that level of reaction.
Yeah.
And by the way, the idea of ETs and UFOs was almost universally known throughout the entire world. I mean, you have to be living in a cage or living in a cave in rural India or on that Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean where nobody goes because they'll shoot you if you.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally have to live at some end of the world to not know about this. The film industry has made hundreds and hundreds of movies about extraterrestrials. So the idea of extraterrestrials is anything but new. The only thing that's new is they're real and they're here. And that has been gaining awareness in the world's population for 50 years.
It's not just science fiction anymore.
No, of course not. So again, I just have no faith in any of the apocalyptic, scary ceremonies about or statements about how humans are going to react to this. Humans are going to be just fine with this. They're going to, in fact, think it's cool. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to party. They're going to make humor. The stand-up comedians will have their day. And they'll probably start to improve their attitude about government's ability to tell the truth, which could have far-reaching consequences. So the arguments about disruption, if it's done the way we're discussing, are very little value.
We have a question from the chat. Wayutan asks, what happens after disclosure? What's step 2? Do we unite forces as a species to try to frantically get our technology to a point where we can defend ourselves?
No, that would be a mistake. There will be those that will suggest that. Hopefully, they will be dismissed. It's yeah, but not everybody took physics in school. I get that. Not everybody knows how an atomic bomb works.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not many understand the technological level you have to be at to be interstellar, if they're interstellar, which I think they are. But I'll include interdimensional. And so they have abilities to do harm to us, which we can't even imagine. And so we can't win that war. That's why elementary school kids don't get together and march on institutions in their town or the state and try to trash them. They're elementary kids. It's not a fair fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they don't do that. All right. Well, we're elementary kids compared to the ETs. And so we can't beat them with violence. We have to rely on their good graces and their protocols. And so far, the evidence points to an acceptable set of protocols. That doesn't mean they don't do some things which are not particularly pleasant, but we can say that about just every living person on the planet. So, are they acting exactly the way they would like us to act? No. Are the other nations in the world acting exactly as we want them to exact? No. Are we all going to throw a hissy fit, rip off our clothes, set ourselves on fire? No. It's just going to be, we're going to adapt to some new circumstances, which will have pluses and minuses. That is exactly the path the human race has been on forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as big a deal as people think. It is still the biggest news story in history and the most profound event in human history, I believe. But that's more of a larger scale statement, which is true. But in the more granular area and the local area, it's just not that big a deal.
Because we can handle the truth.
Of course, we could have handled it in 1947, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But and that might have changed history for the better, a lot better. But too late for that. Of course, we can handle the truth. My God, anybody that can binge, I don't know, 100 hours of a really good Netflix series is capable of handling things.
Yeah.
We're very talented. Our most talented are incredibly talented. And if we start fixing our political economic systems so that the poorest don't suffer deprivation, pain, and suffering, which makes them angry, which makes them riot and burn things down, they'll be fine too. The guy wheeling a full basket of rotting clothes down a street in West LA, I assure you, the least of his issues and concerns will be, oh, there's extraterrestrials here. So we don't have to worry about them.
So in this day and age, whether we're pre-disclosure, in the middle of disclosure, or post-disclosure, how do you respond to skeptics that question the validity of UFO sightings or the existence of ETs?
I don't. I just don't. I don't care what they think. They have a right to think what they want. I also don't. I don't go into debates with flat earthers and a number of other interesting genres.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time for it. At some point, you know the situation and you move on. It's okay. Don't be disrespectful to them. Don't get cocky. Humility is always the best path, even in normal times. But when you're dealing with major times, when you're dealing with massive change of a scope that really you and most everybody else around you have never experienced. Humility is critical. One of the great tragic failures to follow this dictum occurred with the acquiring of independence by this huge nation, India, that went through a lot of pain and suffering to get that independence. And then the arrogance of the factions and the other people, or people with factions, with their own beliefs that they felt were superior to others, led into an incredibly destructive transition from colonial India to free India, where more people were killed than the British could have ever dreamed of killing. And the fundamental cause was the inability to rise to humility in transcendental times. Gandhi tried to help there. He was always pretty much a humble guy. He was trying to instill humility in the various parties. Don't do this. But they couldn't help themselves. And so Indian independence ended up being a tragedy rather than a glory.
Yeah.
That's one of the most stark examples of victory without humility. There are others, but it's hard to beat that one, to be honest with you. But this is a different issue. We weren't occupied by the ETs, we're being engaged. And there's a lot of positives to confirming this. It's nonpartisan. There's no religious divide on it. There's no ethnic divide on it. And really, there's no political divide on it. And so I do not see a repeat of the paradigm shift of India moving to a fully free country. But we need to be cautious about that. We need to be on alert for that to happen in some respects, where people become just overwhelmingly thrilled with their success and suddenly very dismissive of anybody that's not on board with their thinking. And we could have some disruption. Nothing like what happened in India, but still unpleasantness. We don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
ETs are here. I assure you, they didn't come here for a particular race, a particular political party, or a political ethnicity.
Or boundaries.
They see the world as a singularity, a globe of life with massive variety, which just makes it more attractive.
I guess one thing that they could teach us, and maybe a better question would be, how do you navigate the fine line between credible research and the more speculative or fringe aspects of the UFO community?
Scientific research should have many levels. It should have very basic research that's well documented and well reviewed. It should have some more advanced research that also needs to be documented and reviewed, but provided a little more latitude because it has to be further developed. And then we also need to have radical research. People willing to go where others fear to go. And they should be allowed to do that without having stupid things said about them on scientific publications. We need to respect the maverick, the out-of-the-box thinker, and give them a chance to do their thing, and then give them an honest hearing, and not snub our noses. People that seem to have firm knowledge, which may be correct, frequently translate that into hubris. It's human nature. We need a lot less hubris, a lot of humidity, and you never need it more than when you have a major change in the way the world works, what we learn about the world, how it works, what we call paradigm shifts. That's when you need humility the most.
Yeah.
And those who practice that will fare better in the post-disclosure world. Those who do not will not fare up to their expectations.
Getting back to the UFOs and nukes or nuclear weapons tampering, how important is this kind of evidence? What are the implications?
Huge implications. Of all the ET activities, and we've chronicled quite a bit, there are two areas that you can divide their activities into two areas. One is their stuff. They put crop circles down for a reason, probably to benefit them in some way. They need the cow blood. They get that. They need that. They deal with humans. They interact. They study, and they even do genetic work with them. They create hybrids. They're doing this for themselves. If there is a human benefit from it, then that's one of the very first questions that need to be asked post-disclosure of people prepared that know something about it and they need to be heard under oath in front of millions of people. That's a question to be asked. Is there any benefit at all? I'm going to assume there's very little. It's for them. That's what they need to do. This is the same thing how we operate. The other thing that's happening, I think, is almost exclusive. Well, is essentially for us, but it's also for them. But we're the focus. They get a benefit. And that is the matter of nuclear weapons. And the single most important thing they're doing with their stuff that we should know more about is the creating of hybrids. I want to know why they're doing it, and I want to know where they are. It is the single most important thing. And in the political
I remember from reading the work of Bud Hopkins that he estimated, based on the number of people that he'd worked with over his career, that there were something like 5% of the global population that were being involved in this hybridization program.
Could be that high. I think I operate off a 2%, 3% number. It's a staggering number. That in of itself is remarkable.
Still a lot of people.
Yeah, but in the case of the political side, the single most important thing they have done is turning off our nukes. And the government knows this, and the government understands the implications of any credible officers come forward and actually had a hearing, which is why they have done everything they could, short of being really unpleasant, to never have those hearings. They want these men to die, and they won't have to hear them. Unfortunately for them, the officers in many cases were down in the silos. They never actually saw the craft, but they witnessed the witness being turned off. Fortunately for the government, the guys up top that actually saw the craft were much younger than the officers, and there's more of them around. And clearly the bar is being lowered every year or month even to allow them to come forward with little consequence. Prior to this legislation, because they had younger lives, younger families, they just did not want to do what Bob Salas was doing. And I get that. Now they're older, and so they can start coming forward. So the policy of ignoring them is going to collapse, and these witnesses are going to come forward, and the public is going to learn about all the instances that the missiles were turned off. If they're smart, they'll get some Russian witnesses in there, though it's a little awkward right now, who can testify to the same thing happening in the Soviet Union.
Except in the Soviet Union, they were turned on.
In the Soviet Union, they were turned off. And on
at least in one case, they were turned
on.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., they were turned off, but I think there's evidence that in one occasion they turned them on, which is even more powerful than turning them off. Okay. And by turning them on, I mean they're launched into launch sequence without the keys being turned.
Right.
So
which is basically them telling us we can control your nuclear weapons, so you might as well dump them, right?
Well, they're saying two things. One, well, I believe so, and I think the witnesses are in the same vein. You can't use them against us. So if you're using that as an excuse in your
Forget
internal
it.
discussions down at the Pentagon, it's a bogus excuse.
Mhm.
So put it aside. That's one message. And the other message is, why in the hell do you have them in the first place? I mean, what do you think is going to come from this? Right? Nothing. It's not going to end well. So here's a little reason why, which brings up another very important question, which is exopolitical, and which I'm loving to see answer and ask. And that is, why not just destroy them completely? You could do that. There wouldn't be any. We have to build more, but still, the statement would be even stronger. Very interesting question. I'd love to know why. Destroying them completely would be more traumatic and might trigger a nuclear weapon launch that turning them off would not. I mean, there's probably a logical reason for that. But that is the most important thing they do. And so it looks as if, and I think the government knows this, APRO knows this, and the Senate knows this. And so I will be shocked if the nuclear weapons witnesses are not front and center on first day of hearings, which there might be 2 or 3 sessions with 3 different sets of witnesses.
Mhm.
I will be stunned if they don't do that. And then if they bring in Grush and a couple of witnesses from the USAPs dealing with technology and bodies, it's game over, folks. I mean, that's it. Okay. The Washington Post and the Washington Times are going to basically give marching orders to every one of their national security correspondents, their the Pentagon correspondents. Go on down to their public relations offices and take no prisoners, right? You know, and so at that point, the president steps in and prevents this kind of chaos and highly, how would you say, confrontational post-disclosure journalism. In other words, cooperate, right? Don't make Bob Woodward have to spend 20 visits to a stupid underground garage in Roswell. Send somebody down there and give him the story, right? In the comfort of his office. Have some donuts and a couple of croissants. And stop the hocus pocus and all the hiding and the secrecy. This is something the public do not want. They're done with this. They want it reformed. So they have this enormous opportunity to make friends and influence people if they do it in the right way. And I think the ETs are thinking along similar lines. It is in the ET's interest, if open contact is on the agenda, that they make friends and influence people, not create enemies that will push back against whatever the hell they're going to try to do post-disclosure. So their public relations skills are certainly equal to ours, might even be superior to ours. I don't know. But
except for the fact that when abductees find themselves in an apartment where hybrids are supposed to be living, they have all the furniture piled up in one room, and they ask questions like, where does the furniture go? Who gets to watch TV? How long do they watch TV? What are these silver dining implements for, and how do you use them? They seem to be kind of stupid about general human stuff,
which is not ideal. Which brings us to a very significant conference. The year escapes me. I think we got to go back a number of years. It could be the early aughts. It might have been in the 1900s. I don't think it was. I think it was in the early aughts. Because I think it'd been to 2 or 3 by then. I'll pick a date, 2005, whatever. What I learned at that conference was pretty significant. And that is, at the very last minute, I think both Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, it may have been that one, maybe Jacobs was already booked, but Hopkins said, look, I'm not booked, but I want in. You got to let me come in. I want to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was they wanted to do a joint presentation together. And so David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins gave a joint presentation in which they put forward their view on Jacobs' findings and his theories, which he had written initially in his book. This escapes me. The name of the book was
Bud Hopkins' book,
no, David Jacobs' book, The Threat. It's
The
called The
Threat.
Threat.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, fine. Now the book is out. Why do they need to hold this joint get together? And it's kind of mysterious and coming at the last minute. Well, they did it because they wanted to convey information that they considered pretty important, very important. And this is one of countless things that has disappeared back into the bushes. You don't hear about it because so much has happened. Who the hell can keep track of it? And who has the money to really build? Well, I mean, it could be in a documentary. Maybe it is. But our documentaries are hard to do. We don't have any money. It takes forever. I'm trying to change that, by the way, as part of my engagement of the film industry. But so the message they had to say was intriguing, to say the least. And what was this message? Why did one of them, I think it was Bud, go to great trouble to talk his way into the, I know you didn't ask me to come, but I got to be there. I got to be there. And, they wisely said, okay, Bud. Don't know if they paid his way. He might have paid his own way. It doesn't matter. So they're now appearing together on the stage. And here's what they said. They independently both were experiencing similar accounts from contactees they were working with. And what these contactees were being asked to do is deal with hybrids of various level of hybridness. And they were told to work with them and train them how to do basic tasks, how to sit down at dinner and eat, how to order stuff at a grocery store, and a whole list of these kinds of things, just how to look normal, which, by the way, is exactly what governments do in war when they train some of their own people to become spies on the other side. They got to teach them all the mannerisms and how they speak.
I remember specifically one show. It was a British TV show. I think it was called Wish Me Luck. And a woman was being told by one of the higher ups, a general or something like that, make sure you don't stir your tea. The Germans put the milk in the bottom of the cup and then pour the tea on top of that. Things like that.
This has come up in a number of movies. One of the better known is Inglourious Bastards, where one of the army guys, one of the infiltrator, the spies posing as Germans, gets confronted by a boisterous with the woman spy present, one of the boisterous officers in the pub, who's a little suspicious, but he's handling himself well. They've all got guns pointed at each other under the table, and he orders 3 beers. Okay, and so he holds up his hand and he says, where's that? He says, need 3 beers. Okay. And the officer instantly understood, no. That's now how Germans order 3 beers. They order it that way. Okay. Fingers forward, not backward. And so he realized this guy was a spy, and things went from bad to worse, and everybody's getting shot pretty soon.
Yeah.
This is not easy to do. And so, of course, this is in wartime. And so they were both saying that contactees were being used to train hybrids to try to fit in. This obviously was a big deal, and it particularly was difficult for David because he already developed theory that the hybrid program is a replacement program, meaning they're going to replace us, or at least they're going to come down and be running things because they're smarter and have other abilities we don't have. And so he became famous for that theory. And I listened and read it. I'm not on board with it. I think he's wrong, but it's a legitimate point to make, and to dismiss it would be foolish. And so we need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
Right?
his most recent book, Walking Among Us, kind of goes through all those scenarios, and I couldn't finish it. It paints a really negative scenario about the insinuation of extraterrestrials into humanity.
His prerogative. He's a smart man. He's paid his dues. By and
Yeah,
large, there aren't many of those kinds of scenarios. You've got David Paulides, who is exploring the scenario, which is definitely negative. They actually do take a lot of people and don't bring them back.
yeah,
Well, that's definitely an escalation of the basic protocol. Is he right? Is he wrong? I don't know. But it's legitimate to bring up if you bring it up with humility.
right.
In other words, you got to be humble in your speculations and theories.
I have
And
your website up on the screen, and I wanted to ask you: is the Rockefeller Initiative really even uh, relevant at this point?
time certainly diminishes relevance. Historically, it's relevant because it launched the Clintons into the issue, whether they wanted to or not. It created a record which I and Grant Cameron were able to use, a paper trail that didn't hurt because hard evidence, it's hard documents. Of course, it was fairly early back in the 1990s, late 1990s. And so the media, in all of its infinite wisdom, decided, yeah, they're just documents. And we're not buying it. So they didn't address it. But Hillary Clinton always wanted to be president. And so as they moved forward, and as the Rockefeller Initiative became known, and it did become known, she had to know that she was going to have to address this when she ran for president. And that carried forward. She wasn't in the campaign long enough in 2008 to make a big splash, but she was in 2016.
Yeah.
And that's where I came in. And I generated, working with my media lists and so forth, over 400 articles connecting her to the issue.
I think that changed the game completely.
I think it didn't hurt, and it ultimately led to her making certain statements, going further than she would have wanted to. And not only that, her advisor Podesta made statements. Her husband made statements. Even Barack Obama came in and made some statements, all of which supported the idea that it's okay to talk about this. And if she'd gone further, she would have won the White House. But she capped it out at a certain level. Didn't want to take the risk. Adverse risk can be brutal in politics. So she didn't take a risk, and that didn't help. And she was writing for the Secretary of State job at that point. And I did everything I can to really push her to go and do it all, go full Monty on this. She couldn't do it. And I believe that she would have won. So, but nevertheless, her campaign raised awareness on the issue. I mean, that campaign was watched by a lot of people. It made a strong statement. She went way past Kucinich, way past Bill Richardson, I assure you, in that campaign. And if she won, I think we would have gotten disclosure in early 2017 by the fall. And we'd already be 6 years into the post-disclosure world. Probably wouldn't have had a war in Ukraine, and a lot of other things wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously I can't prove that. So why even say it? Because it irritates some of the skeptics. So she had her mark, and I hope that they find a way to get back in this issue and be there for.
Steve, what do you think are the consequences if the American people don't exert their power to reform the national security infrastructure.
To simplify it, there will be people that want to go through this paradigm shift, this world-changing event, and as quickly as possible, put the world back in order exactly the way it was before disclosure took place, because that's what they're used to. That's where they make their most money. They don't like change. They don't like, to be uncomfortable. There's going to be a certain number of people that are going to want to do that. We have to make sure they don't prevail. We need to marshal multiple major reform issues, and using the internet and our newfound solidarity and empowerment from succeeding with this, ending this embargo, start really pushing the election officials toward reform, getting rid of the ones that won't reform, replacing them with reformists, and start fixing stuff in the post-disclosure world. We have a very long laundry list of things that have to be fixed.
Yeah.
And it's not casual stuff preparing for company to come. It's existential stuff.
It's not just cleaning up the house and making sure you swing by the liquor store.
No, we got to get going. We have a limited amount of time. If we don't, one day the temperature in Phoenix is going to rise to 160 degrees and everybody in the whole damn town is going to die of heat stroke. And that's going to be a tragedy.
So
we don't want that.
What's the best way for the public to exert pressure on the government, or even to band together themselves and exert their own political capital to turn this issue over?
I got the answer for you. A lot of people don't like it. At this point, there's one fundamental course of action. Use your email when you can. Best not to call. Getting lots of calls is not something that endures you to an office. The occasional call. There is a time to call a member, a representative, or an office, local or national. But mass calling, no, this does not help. Email, and then take full advantage of social media, particularly Twitter and maybe Threads. But if you bother to do the searches, like search ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, search news producer, search all these little terms, you will be amazed at how many members of the Twitter world are on Twitter. You will be amazed at the high percentage of members of Congress, House and Senate that have Twitter accounts. A limited number have DMs. You can direct message them. That's cool. But you can also get their attention by doing tweet at, right? Tweet something and then make sure you add, instead of using their name, say at Senator Rubio.
Right.
Or whatever his handle. You got to find the handle. It's easy to do. You just research it. In fact, there's probably some sites that have already done that. You just go to the site and copy it. The point is, so I'm inviting people to start pumping out social media tweets. Twitter is, I think, preferable. Threads is coming on. Use that. TikTok, Instagram, whatever if they've got a page, tweet them and hashtag them. Or I say hashtag them. Do the at person. And what should you tell them? How wonderful they are. Shower them with praise. Praise every statement they've made, every legislation they've passed, every bold step they've made. Just praise them. Don't even think to go negative.
And use their name.
Shower them with praise. That's the best thing you can do right now. We're not going through a period where that's first on people's laundry list, and that's a mistake because it's powerful, and criticism is much less powerful. When members of government, particularly, which is somewhat true probably of famous people, movie stars and sports guys, but much so with political media, they get all kinds of hate mail. They get all kinds of nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And guess what? They file it or delete it. They don't go rushing down the hall telling everybody about this awful death threat they just got.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll tell the security, the national police, police, but praise. They love telling their friends at lunch about this great email they got from this constituent, just telling them how thrilled they were that they did this. You love to share praise because it makes you look good. And so you praise them. They share the praise. The people that hear the shared praise are going, I want praise too. So they may do something that they know is going to garnish it. And the next thing you know, everybody's in a praise fest going on down there. People are more motivated by the carrot than the stick. This is not a difficult equation to solve. And those that solve it as family, as parents, end up with kids that don't go to jail or die of drugs or get head to toe tattoos.
Right.
Praise them to guide them. And so now we are winning, and we need to praise them to death. So that's what you can do. Everybody can do it. If you don't have Twitter, sign up on Twitter, right? And then start searching for every member of Congress by name and start cataloging, archiving all their Twitter feeds. And then you just go on and fight. Now, it helps if you connect it to something they do. So if Tim Bassett gets out there and says something cool, fire him off a few hundred positive tweets.
Or retweet it.
Email him.
Yeah.
Right? And tell him that, love that. That's good, Tim. Like what you're saying. You're speaking truth to power, man. That's what we want to hear. And he'll go to lunch the next day and tell 3 colleagues about how he got these great emails because of what he said. Let's praise them. The final move in this chess game is to praise them into checkmate. In other words, praise them so much they go, I give up. You win. I'm taking my king down. Look, I love it. You got the game. Let's move on. Let's love each other. Let's sing Kumbaya, and let's go reform the United States. That's what I'm suggesting. There isn't anything better than that. I'm telling you, there is nothing you can do.
We do have a question.
Bribery, you can't do that.
We do have a question from the chat. Zizix9911 says, if this is redundant, sorry, but opinions on Space Force. Is there a Space Force, Steve?
It's a shiny object that somebody wanted done, and they knew Trump would probably go for it. So they threw it out there and they got it. And it feels cool to have a Space Force.
What is the Space Force? Are we talking about fleets of our own spacefaring vehicles, or is it just people on the ground?
As far as we know,
it's patches on their shoulder.
Well, it's a new patch. It's a new military entity, so it's got all kinds of new people running it and whatever, and it's a feather in some people's cap. It's a marker. It's another challenge coin.
Right.
But we already have a secret space program. We've always had that. We've always had a classified program. And there's another program called the
speaking of challenge coins, there's the Cardinal Sin challenge coin.
There you go. Very important. Trade those.
Into the Fringe on the back. Yeah. Become a member at the Unseen Mysteries level on Patreon, and it can be yours.
So the Space Force was an unnecessary add-on that benefits some people, got some money. It is not without legitimacy because there is the potential for war in space. Right? I would prefer they spent more time trying to negotiate that away and get us a weapons and space treaty than spending a ton of money on posturing with the Space Force, meaning we have a Space Force now. Don't you dare do an EMP blast over our country. Because that's just, it's a basic, okay, they're going to have a Space Force, and then our Space Force is going to have to be bigger than their Space Force or whatever the hell. They could have just kept it under the heading of classified space programs and done the same thing. But this was a bauble hangled in front of Donald Trump that it was an easy take for him. All I can, now we could end up using a Space Force to fight are, quote, remaining enemies in space. It would not go well. If it involves blowing up satellites, it's going to create a massive amount of space junk, which is going to start cascading through the orbiting systems and taking out other satellites, and our communication system is going to probably go to hell. But they will be able to say, we had a war in space. We did it, like Star Wars.
Woohoo!
Like
Yeah.
Space Trek. We don't have proton torpedoes yet, but give us time. We can get those.
Right.
And so we're out there shooting up satellites and having war in space. This is what we do. We have war in the water. We have war underwater. We have war in the air. We have war on the land. War is what we do. War is the number one hobby of the human race going back
As far as
to
history.
the flood, right? Prior to the flood, skirmishes maybe, little one-on-one. But after civilization got going, war became our number one hobby. And so it's going to destroy the planet. It's going to destroy all of us. We need to reform that. And that's not working, right? We're not reforming it. We're picking little things that we can do, like recycling our bottles and cans and hoping that that will save us. Mm-hmm. It's not going to. And there isn't an international treaty banning weapons in space. This is up on my screen. There isn't one. Sorry, there isn't.
Yeah.
There's been an attempt to get them for decades, but no, they can't get the signatures. So we don't have one yet. Now, that's that. And as I told one of the longest running proponents of an international treaty in space, anti-weapons treaty in space, Carol Rosin, we had a simple perspective. I remember the moment that I expressed it. It was, one of those, kind of poignant moments. She passionately believed that we could not have a treaty in space banning weapons. We couldn't have disclosure, rather, until we had a treaty in space banning weapons. And I was exactly the opposite view, which we exchanged with comedy. My view is quite simple. We will not get a treaty in space banning weapons until after disclosure. Disclosure first, then stuff like that. Then like a lot of stuff like that. We have pretty much pushed the envelope on about just every bad idea that we've ever had. And while we're trying to fix it, our mistakes are just way too much. We don't have time to fix it. The effort is fine, and I love the little vignettes that you read about, and this person did this something cool and everything else, but nobody even remotely discusses how that's going to be globalized. I mean, it's a nice little thing, and give the person credit, but it's not going to save us at all. We need an age of reform unlike the world has ever seen. We need something. It's going to take something massive to trigger that age of reform. And there's only one thing with the gravitational mass to do that. Nothing else is even in the ballpark. It shouldn't even show up at the game. Yeah. Right. Don't even bother to show up. You're not in the game. We don't even want you in the ballpark. Don't even park in the parking lot. Nothing else comes close to this. Disclosure, the confirmation of a non-human intelligence, almost certainly from other star systems, is of a size big enough to literally tweak the worldview of billions of people and suddenly open up pathways in their worldview that they could travel to arrive at a reformist agenda where, let's fix things. It's like the bachelor that lives in a house and he simply has no interest in fixing anything. And a thing turns into an absolute death trap. It's awful. It stinks. It's got bacteria. Could kill him at any moment. And then he's out walking his dog, who somehow has survived this hellhole, and he meets another a woman walking her dog, and they really hit it off. And he thinks he's found the love of his life. It's a major worldview change, emotionally driven, but nevertheless a worldview change. And so what does he do? He goes back to his house and he spends 3 solid weeks cleaning it completely up, fixing stuff, getting the refrigerator to run, cleaning the dogs. He gets the place immaculate, invites her over for dinner. That is pretty much what I'm talking about. If we can get the post disposal, well,
Just
that
on
is
a
one
macro
of my
scale.
top analogies. I should probably finish on that. I don't think I can top that analogy, Miguel. Maybe it's time to end while we're ahead. What do you think?
I think we have some DVDs to give away.
Oh yes, we got that. Let's do that.
I see Darius Munchausen here. Hello.
Hello.
And I see anti-derivative Jill, but she's just left us. So we'll go ahead and bring up the wheel here.
All right,
And
we got it.
Steve, as you probably are aware, this is the part of the show that bothers me the most because it makes my head spin around like The Exorcist.
Close your eye. Don't watch it.
I'll do that. I will.
That's what you want to do.
And so the first DVD that we're going to give away is the Danny Sheehan UFO Mega Conference from the 3rd annual Laughlin event,
which I recall lasted 4.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a long one. Yeah.
It's a lot longer than a TED Talk.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine Danny Sheehan giving a TED Talk. It cramps my brain. Can't do that.
You'd sell out the Hollywood Bowl and then everybody would leave before he was done. Okay, Darius, let's go ahead and give her a spin.
All right. Look away, Gil. Here we go.
I'm looking away.
This is done through touch?
Just point and click. And it is random.
Nicholas Horton.
Nicholas Horton. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Justice for Rebecca Edgerunners. Okay, that's an interesting.
And of course, all you have to do is send me your mailing address if you're a winner to gil@sunflower.com, and I'll pop it in the mail and get it right out to you. And the next one that we're giving away is the Mark D'Antonio presentation from the UFO Mega Conference. So let's spin the wheel and see who gets that one.
All right, here we go.
Hi there.
PJ Bear.
PJ Bear. Hey, boo boo. Congratulations.
Right.
All right. Our next giveaway.
So who gets it? Who's getting it?
PJ Bear.
PJ Bear.
Oh, this is the person you're selecting to do the spin. Oh, I got it. Okay, I'm learning.
Yep.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Yep. Everyone enters their own name, and then they send their email address and mailing address to Gil.
This is some sort of a nice app that you apply, you load up to your computer. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. The next one is Paul Stonehill's conference lecture, Turbulent Skies, Stormy Weathers. It looks like everybody else is going to be a winner, so let's check it out.
All right, here we go.
Radioactive.
Congratulations. I believe you know what to do, Radioactive.
Yes.
And Cardinal is very discreet. He deletes the personal information every time. So make sure to send it to him again.
Now, this one is Richard Dolan's presentation from the UFO Mega Conference. I've seen this one. It's really, really worth watching. So let's spin it.
All right.
Canadian Spider-Man.
Spidey.
Woohoo! And Wyutan says, I don't see my name on the wheel. I clicked on the link for the sign up. I guess it bugged out. Oh well. Can you put him on?
I think Jill might be able to do it.
If Jill is still here.
Jill is
She says you might have
Really
entered
upset
too
about that.
late. I'm sorry. Okay, well, maybe
Okay.
next time.
Okay.
And so, de facto, the winner of the Incredible Disclosures panel at the UFO Mega Conference is Izix 9911.
Congratulations.
Wait a minute. Why couldn't that be 1166 Zai Zai? Could be. Maybe not.
Because you'd be reading it upside down and backward.
Yeah.
Or
Maybe. You can give it a spin if you want.
No. It's the number one is correct. It does it upside down. Okay.
Yeah.
To make a cool
And
logo, though.
Anti-derivative Jill points out that happens a lot where several people sign up in the end when the time is up.
You got to give them more notice. Give them a little more notice. Give an exact time or something. But hey, you can't give out too many DVDs. I'll have one for you when I come on next.
Great. That
Yeah.
means you're coming back on. Woohoo!
Of course.
Before we wrap up for the night, I just although I've been dropping your website into the chat and showing it while we share it, is there anything that you'd like to share with us about upcoming appearances, whether it's live or virtual or anything you have coming up?
Oh yeah, look, there's going to be a huge conference in Vegas at the Luxor Hotel, November 10-12. Stairway to the Stars. 60 some speakers, huge number of hotel rooms are being booked, and it could be after some major developments in Washington, so the energy level could be quite outstanding. So I encourage you be there for that one. And then I will be speaking in December 1-3 at the Ufology World Conference. This time it's being held in Mexico City, the largest city, I believe, that they've held their event. Mexico has an extremely high interest in the subject. God knows how many people will be at that. That's going to be a big deal. Mexico City. You can Ufology World Conference, easy to find. Just Google that. I am really trying to build up my Twitter followers, and I'm down around 29,000. I need to start getting this up. So I need people. It's very helpful when you're an activist, particularly when things are really happening. And I post a lot. I've posted only 10,000 tweets. So
what is your Twitter
the handle is at Steve Bassett. That's an easy one. At Steve Bassett, the handle. But then you search Paradigm Research Group, and that takes you to the same page. So by all means, if you could sign up on Twitter for me. I also have a decent number of LinkedIn followers and members. So I welcome LinkedIn members. Facebook is a little less productive right now. I have a number of Facebook pages. You can look for them. Paradigm Research Group has a group page. So does Exopolitics World Network, which I started. And then I have my Steve Bassett page, but I've only got about 13 slots left. But you can follow, as you know, a personal page.
Sure.
So and I do post on them. So any social media support translates into value if you are an activist. And so I welcome people doing that.
Well, just like here on YouTube, we'd be nothing without our followers and our subscribers and our chat. And it wouldn't make any difference if you were a lobbyist or an activist if nobody paid attention to what you're doing.
Yeah. I'm not a natural self-promoter. I really don't do it. And I don't like hype. I avoid it. So
I, on the other hand, am a shameless self-promoter. So
that's good. So you shamelessly self-promote for me, then.
I'll promote your stuff as much as possible.
Yes, indeed. And I promise the next time I'm going to have a much more well-lit and a better camera and all kinds of good stuff.
Sounds great.
It's only going to get better from here, guys.
Can't wait. Well,
all
Steve,
right.
Thank you so much again for coming on. Mm-hmm. It's always a pleasure to have you. So, and thanks for spending time with us. I know that you're in the middle of going, hither and thither, and I really appreciate it.
Next time we'll talk. Well, I'll be spending about 10 days a month on average in LA in the press building, but about 20 days the West will be back in LA, getting this media stuff out and in play and making contacts and meetings, which is the real reason I'm there. The film industry has enormous power that has been reluctant to use to address the real issue here. And that's what the people are going to want after disclosure, not another couple of hundred fictional movies about ETs. I'm not saying they won't watch some of them, but they're going to want to know about the real ETs. And this industry is perfectly positioned to make a lot of money by educating the world with their high quality production films, docs, and other things.
Yeah.
As well as high quality podcasts. The podcast world will continue and thrive.
We'll
and
be
have
able
bigger
to keep
viewership,
track of,
and I will always be available.
We'll be able to keep track of the documentaries on paradigmresearch.org, right?
You can track the fictional. No, you can track on Paradigm. You can track the print media, right? I can't track the non-print media. It's just too much.
You have part of one of your pages is suggested documentaries to watch.
I do have that, and I need to update that. Actually, I need to update that page. There's a lot of parts of that big site I need to update.
There have been a lot of great documentaries lately.
Sure.
James Fox's documentaries, his last ones were really good.
Oh yeah, his place in all of this historically is well made. I'd like to be able to find that connections that would allow him to fund a documentary with some serious money and get it done in 6 months, 8 months, and not 7 years.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I'm here. Just trying to see if we can engage. This has happened before. The film industry 30 years ago got huge into the environment. It was a big deal, obviously not as controversial as the ET issue and not as controversial as the remote environment today. And they formed the Environmental Media Association. It still exists today. Huge number of money was put into it. So the film industry can have that kind of impact. It needs to do the same thing now for the UAP disclosure change that's going on. And I will have an announcement about that pretty soon too. So there's a little project going on there. I'm having so much fun late in life. I can't afford to die anytime soon. So I'm going to have to continue my better diet and all my supplements. And I may even start exercising.
Sounds good.
Why
That's
not?
good advice for everybody.
So true. But toward the end, you really need to think it through. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
if you've got a reason to really stick around, boy, then it gets really fun. So I think I got a good 10 years, and I think what we're going to see in the next 10 years is going to make everything worth it.
I hope you're right.
Okay, Gil.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Good night.
We'll see you next time.
Yes, indeed. All right.
And it's Cardinal Sin out.